We've been looking into symbols and signs in the Bible. So many parts of the Bible have a deeper meaning than what we might realise.
So does this mean the Bible is like a code book that we need to decipher to predict certain things? We can be like secret agents figuring out the code.
Well, not necessarily. It's more that these symbols are like lenses we can look through at the world around us. The symbols are often just that, symbolic. They are there to represent something and make a point.
Even the numbers in the Bible have a purpose. For example, let's look at the number 7.
In the Bible, 7 is seen as the number of completion. There are many examples of this, going right back to the very beginning.
Genesis tells us that God created in 6 days, and on the 7th day, he rested. Interestingly, the 7th day in the Genesis account is the only day that actually doesn't have an end.
Ever since then, the 7th day has referred to the concept of rest and completeness. We see this as the people of Israel become a nation and are given certain practices by God, many of which they still continue today.
On the 7th day of every week, the Jewish people were to Shabbat, or rest. This was known as the Sabbath day.
Every 7 years was to be a Sabbath year, where the land would not be worked, it was to rest.
Then after 7 lots of 7 years, there was a really special year known as the Year of Jubilee. This was a year when all those who had lost land could get it back and all the slaves were to be set free. It was a year to put right what might have gone wrong for people.
So how should we interpret this? What significance can we take from the number 7?
Let's find out.
The people of Israel were called by God to be his special people, his distinct people that were to show the rest of the world what it looked like to live for God. They were to be a symbol and a sign themselves for God and his purposes. In order for them to be able to do this in the right way, God gave them practices, and they're often called ordinances in the Bible, for them to obey, to remind them of who they were and what they were called to do. One of the main ways of doing this was through these set of 7s that we've been hearing about, whether it was every 7th day to rest and remember what God had done for them, whose people they were, whether it was every 7 years when the land was to rest, or whether it was every 7 years or 49 years, where the 50th year would then be the year of Jubilee, when the people would be allowed to, things would be put right again if something had gone wrong for people in the meantime. But just as Israel received these amazing promises from God, they also were warned by him. In Leviticus 26, after God has just given the instructions for things like the Sabbath year and the year of Jubilee, God gives them this warning in Leviticus 26 from verse 33. I will scatter you among the nations and bring out my sword against you. Your land will become desolate and your cities will lie in ruins. Then at last the land will enjoy its neglected Sabbath years as it lies desolate while you are in exile in the land of your enemies. So God knows in advance that Israel are eventually going to disobey him because they're not going to allow the land to have its Sabbath rest, and they're going to let go of the Shabbat or the Sabbath that they as people are supposed to be doing every week as well. So then if we fast forward to the book of 2 Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Chronicles is like this picture of the kings of Israel that came many, many years after Leviticus was written under the time of Moses. Israel now an established nation, and what we see is this up and down in Chronicles of some kings obeying God, some kings disobeying God, and eventually things get really bad and the people under King Nebuchadnezzar are carried into exile in Babylon. And 2 Chronicles ends like this, so chapter 36 and verse 21. So the message of the Lord spoken through Jeremiah was fulfilled. So Jeremiah had also picked up on the prediction that Israel would go into exile, but actually it goes much further back to even the time of Moses. It says, the land finally enjoyed its Sabbath rest, lying desolate until the 70 years were fulfilled, just as the prophet had said. So what we see here is this picture of God saying to the people of Israel, right back before they were even fully established as a nation, You need to obey these things, and you need to obey the call that I'm giving you to be this distinct people. And if you don't do that, I'm going to need to step in and give this land its own rest. And actually, you're going to have to go into exile to learn some things about what it means to be God's people in the world. And then, of course, we have the picture of Jesus showing up and saying that he hasn't come to do away with the law, but to fulfill it. And what we see is that the Shabbat in these days, the seventh day of the week, had become this religious thing where people could basically not do anything because they were so scared of breaking God's law. And so Jesus came in and said, no, it's not about fulfilling a ritual, it's about your heart condition. And so Jesus came and established an opportunity for a new Sabbath rest, a new creation. This is why we know that on the Friday, Jesus gave his life on the cross, but on the Sunday, the first day of the week, he established a new creation, a new kind of Shabbat rest, of Sabbath rest, where we can now remember every single Sunday, which is why we gather for church, and we can remember what Jesus has done on that first Easter morning by rising from the dead, by resurrecting and offering a new chance for a new life in him. So what can we learn from the number 7 and the idea of Sabbath? Well, I would say the 3 R's are things that we can learn. We can rest, reflect, and remember. These are 3 things that I think it would be good for us to have in our head when we think about Sabbath. We should rest in who God is, and especially in what Jesus has done for us by making a relationship with God possible. We don't have to tiptoe around God anymore in a bad sense. It's good to have a good fear of the Lord, but we don't need to tiptoe around him worrying if he's going to expel us if we do something wrong. We can reflect and remember what God has done in the past for us and how far we've come, but then reflect on what that means moving forward as well. In the days and times that we're living at the moment, we've got a lot of time to rest and reflect and remember things. Sometimes maybe it might feel like a little bit too much time. But I would really encourage you, use the time that you have now to remember what Jesus has done for you, to rest in his embrace and to reflect on his plan and purpose for your life. Maybe some of the biggest decisions of your life will come out of this year in lockdown and taking time out from normal life to really hear God's voice and what he is saying to you. And then when you come to live that life, you can do it from a place of rest. And this comes into my last point, which is about the importance of us meeting together. Paul says, do not give up meeting together. Now, of course, we can't meet physically at the moment in so many parts around the world. Churches are forced to meet online or in this kind of way. But it is so important that we stick with it, that we stay in relationship with people. We're so blessed to be in a pandemic in the modern era where we have things like the internet to communicate with one another, Zoom, FaceTime, WhatsApp, all these different things. So let's celebrate together what Jesus has done on that first Sunday morning all those years ago. That's why the Sunday morning gathering is so important, because we're remembering the Sabbath, the rest that God had right from the beginning of creation, but also the new creation that Jesus has brought about, where all of us can come to new life in him and find relationship with him and with one another. Thank you so much for watching the video today. I hope it was helpful to you. We are doing a series where we're looking at different symbols and signs and what they represent and can teach us. So today we were looking at the number 7 and what that signified, and hopefully you realise there's actually quite a lot in there that we can get out of it. If you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you would subscribe and like this video, maybe even leave us a comment. It really helps us in our mission to spread the good news of Jesus and what he's done to as many people as we can. Hope you have a really good week, and I'll see you again same time next week.